Hey everybody, welcome back. It's author MD New, and I am here today to share my writing tips and tricks for authors. Today I thought we would go over some of the things that I wish I knew before I wrote my first novel. This is quite an extensive list, so I do hope that you will bear with me. I think it's filled with a lot of really good information. So if you're thinking about writing your very first novel, these are the things that I really wish I knew before I wrote my first novel. But before we do that, as always, I'm going to ask you to please like this video and to subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. It does mean the world to me, and I really do appreciate it. It lets me know that the content that I'm sending out there is getting people's attention and folks are finding it interesting. Also, if you have questions or want more information or want to contradict anything that I say, please do so in the comments below. I love hearing what you all have to say, and this is really all about authors helping authors. So keep that in mind. And now let's get into the things I wish I knew before I started writing my very first novel. Now this is going to go against a lot of the information that I've said in the past, but for me, I really wish I outlined my novel first. And not so much because I wanted to keep everything organized, but what I wish I could have done is had the information there so I knew where the story was going. I find that for me, without an outline or at least a general idea of the story, like a beginning, middle, and an end, I can write myself into a corner. And then I end up not writing for a while because I get frustrated. And that's not good for anybody. So by creating an outline for the story, even if it's just a really basic outline, that really helps me out. It also lets me locate problems in the story. So if I get to an outline or if I'm outlining it and I'm going through and it's like I get to a couple of chapters and I'm like, oh God, nah, no, this just doesn't work, or how am I going to figure this out, or whatever, right? It just lets me identify those before I start writing so I don't end up hitting these roadblocks as I'm writing. This should not take away from the fun. And if you're a pantser, I totally get it, I totally understand. But correct me if I'm wrong down below. If you're a pantser and you're writing a story, do you run into roadblocks? Do you find yourself getting frustrated with the story? I just want to know. Next up is, and I've said this before and I really do mean it because it's so important. Write what you want to read. And the reason why you're going to do this is because you'll enjoy it. And it'll get you through those really rough patches that you're going to hit when you're writing the story. Trust me, you're going to hit rough patches. We all do. And honestly, you're writing it for you. So don't worry about the judgments. Don't worry about, oh, people aren't going to like it. Oh, people this, oh, people that. Who cares? You're doing something that most people only talk about doing and or will never do in their lives. You're writing a book. Once you finish that book, you'll have done something even less people have done, which is finish a book. So write something that you enjoy and that you want to read. And that way when you're talking about it to other people and you're marketing it or you're out at events or whatever, you are excited about it because you wrote this. And realistically, if you want to read it, chances are that other people will want to read it. Next up, and I cannot emphasize how important this is, it has saved me so much heartache. Mingle with your fellow authors. Get to know the authors in your community. Join a Facebook group, join a writers group. Go out there and go to writing conferences and writing events and writing workshops. Get to know your fellow authors. This will give you the ability to find, hear their expertise, hear their different points of views, and it will also, once you finish that book, it will help you promote your book. Because one thing about authors is we tend to all be really nice people and we do want to help one another. So You get in with a good group of authors, and once you finish that book, not only will they help you celebrate, but they're going to also help promote your book, right? And that is awesome. Next up, and this is getting into the actual crafting of the book and the writing of the book, but remove filter words. Filter words are not your friend. And filter words are things like see, saw, hear, think, feel, etc. They basically, if you basically a filter word doesn't need to be there, so if you can remove it, remove it. I've talked about this before, and I've said I have a list of filter words that I love to use, but when I'm going back and editing, I remove. So, an example. He heard wind howling outside the window. Well, instead of saying heard, because heard is a filter word, change the sentence to wind howled outside the window. That way you're not, the reader is there with you. They're in the story. They're not being separated from the story. So just go in and remove your filter words. You don't need them. Next up, and this is becoming a lot more important these days than it was in the past, and I think that it is a very valuable tool, is utilize sensitivity readers. I've said this before and I'll say it again. If you're writing about a topic you don't know about or don't know enough from, or you don't come from that background, find readers or fellow authors who are of that background and have them read the story. They're going to point out things that you may have never thought of. They're going to help you create a much better story. What they help you do is they help you remove words and phrases and ideas that may be offensive or off-putting to other readers. And that is so valuable because you do not want to offend other readers. You don't want to isolate a reader, right? Reading is supposed to be for everybody. So a sensitivity reader will help you make your work more approachable for everybody. Next up is understand that genres and categories can be complicated and are two different things. Now, what I mean by this is when you start writing, you want to research the genre you are going to be writing in. You want to know that there are strict rules for each genre. Genre is going to be a tough word for me to get through here. Each genre and subgenre. And if you get it wrong, you can mess up with your marketing and the people who will read your book. Now, how does this have to do with categories? So, genres are about the genre that you're writing in. Sci-fi, romance, adventure, action, etc., etc. The categories, and you have to know the difference here, the categories are important as they are used to identify the age range of your readers. Young adult, adult contemporary, adult, new adult, children, YA, etc., teen, tween. You want to be able to make sure that your book is in those right categories. So not only do you have to worry about the genre, you have to worry about the category. I had this come across in my young adult fantasy book, A Dragon for Christmas. I geared it specifically for young adult. Well, when you're doing that and you're using that category of young adult, there are rules that you have to follow so that it actually qualifies as a young adult story. Things like you can't have explicit sex scenes. Think of it like the Motion Picture Association's ratings, right? You have G, PG, PG-13, R, NC-17, right? That type of thing. So you have to make sure that your rules or that your writing fits within those rules for those categories. So if you're writing a young adult story, you want to make sure that your writing fits a young adult category. You have a lot more leeway once you get into adult contemporary and so forth. But still, even with your genres, there are rules, and you do not want to mess with those rules. If you're writing a romance story, Typically, one of the rules is that they have to have a happily ever after or a happily for now ending. It's just the way it is. A mystery. Well, at the end of the mystery, you have to solve the mystery. See what I'm saying? So there are rules, and really understand your genre and really understand the category. That way, when you're writing your book, you have that all planned out. You know what you have to do. You know what's expected. You know what the readers are going to be expecting. So keep that in mind. Next up, again, this more towards the actual physical writing of the book. Adverbs are easier to avoid than you think. Now, I have nothing against adverbs. Adverbs are wonderful. We like adverbs. But you have to know when to use them and when not to use them. So something like, you don't need to say something along the lines of mostly important. Just say important. We already know when you say important that what is coming up is significant, is important, right? You don't need to add the mostly. Something like, he commented angrily. Well, you don't really need to say commented because it doesn't really mean anything. It's like, okay, fine, and you're saying angrily, so you really want to get rid of angrily. You can say he commented, but if you mean that he's doing it angrily, right, so we want to get rid of angrily, you could just simply say he yelled, he shouted, he snarled, he barked, whatever. So instead of saying he angrily commented, you can say he barked, right? That paints the same picture and that tells the same story that you're trying to get across. Plus, it also makes the sentence less clunky and easier to read. Next up, and this is kind of one of those that people are going to go, but, you have to be willing to delete content from your story that is either filler or doesn't move the plot forward. I know, but let me explain. It might be fun. It might be beautifully written. But if it doesn't advance the story, then you may not need to have it in the book. Now, I am not saying that you have to go through and just get rid of everything that doesn't advance the story or advance the plot. No, you don't need to do that. But you need to be willing to remove things that maybe slow down the pacing, that as much as they're wonderful, the reader's just going to skip through. And this is kind of referred to as killing your darlings. Some people think it has to do with killing the characters, but that's not quite it. Well, it can be, but it's not quite it. It just means that you may love this section, but it doesn't need to be there. I was reading a sci-fi book, and I won't say who the author is, but he's a hard sci-fi author, and I love his writing. But he got into this section of the book where he went into some scientific formulas and personality diagrams and stuff like that, and it was so boring and so dull. And it was pages. I mean, it was like 5, 6, 7, 8 pages of this scientific data, and I was just like, okay, yeah. As a reader, I skipped through it because it wasn't important. It didn't move the story forward. Yes, it gave me great insight into what the characters were thinking and all that, but really, it did nothing. It did nothing for the novel. If an editor were to have come along and just deleted it all, I wouldn't have missed it. And that's the key thing, is you want to make sure that you're not going to take out something that you're going to miss or that the reader might miss, but you're taking out things that no one is going to miss. And it's just something to be cognizant of when you're writing and when you're editing, is, you might love it, but if it doesn't move the plot forward, it's got to go, Now, I'm not saying this for everything, and please contradict me down below in the comments. Feel free to say, but I did. That is totally fine, because I agree with you. I think there's a time and a place for everything, and I think even with some of these, kill your darling things and stuff like that, there's a time and a place for them. So maybe it's not removing it all, but maybe it's just limiting it to one sentence or two sentences or something like that, where the reader can read through it and it's not dragging the story down like a lead balloon. Next up, and again, this is so important, you guys, you really need to hear this one, is find a strong editor. One, don't edit the book yourself. You're not going to find everything. Don't edit, don't have your best friend edit it for you because they're not going to find anything. You need to find a strong professional editor. You want to check you want them to provide you with samples of their work. You want to read books that they've edited. You want to talk with other writers who may have used them. You want to ensure their editing style matches the story and you. So let me put it this way, me as a gay author, I do not want to have my book edited by a Christian fundamentalist, right? We would not agree on a great many things, and it would be a challenge for them to edit the book, and it would be a challenge for me to work with them. So, you want to make sure that you and the editor match. And kind of by doing that, you want to, check their references, talk to other folks, read what they've done. And the other big thing is see what genres they've edited. If you're writing a horror novel and they only edit young adult, then yeah, you're going to want to get a different editor. You're going to want to get an editor who edits horror novels, right? So you're not having to kind of bump heads and all of that. You just want to avoid that. The last tip I've got for you, and this is a big one. So again, please, if you get nothing else from this video, I hope you're still listening to this and I hope you're still watching this because this is the big one. Get your writing advice from a credible source. What I mean by that is you want to talk to other published authors. If a fellow author is telling you their experience in dealing with a publishing house that they've worked with, you want to listen to that advice, right? You want to hear what they have to say. Now, you may not agree with it, and that's fine, but you want to listen to them. You don't want to get advice from somebody who doesn't come from a place of doing. So what I mean by that is aspiring writers who haven't really published a book yet, they might have wonderful advice, but take it with a grain of salt because you want to get advice from people who have already done what you're trying to do. They've already walked through that. They've gotten the 30 rejection letters from potential publishers. They've published multiple books. They might have even won some awards. And so, they know what you're going through. They know what you're about to try. So listen to them. Pay attention to what they have to say because it's going to be great advice. It's the same with if somebody like Stephen King were to give you advice on writing a horror novel, you're going to take that advice. You're going to listen to every word that they have to say because it's flippin' Stephen King, so of course you're going to listen to him. And the other thing to keep in mind is no advice, even my advice today that you're hopefully still listening to, is 100%. Everybody's advice and experience is going to be different, and they're all going to be coming from a different point of view. So nothing is 100%. Even all 10 of these tips that I just gave you for planning, for the things I wish I would have known before I published my first book, it's not 100%, and it's going to be different for everybody. Okay, guys, I hope this information has helped you. I hope that when you're writing your first book or getting that debut novel together, you kind of looked at this and it helped you in one way or another. If you have questions or comments, leave them down below. I love hearing from you guys. Okay, everybody, until next time, have yourself a great day, and we will talk to you again real soon. Take care. Oh, and this has been Author MD New with Writing Tips and Tricks for Authors. Almost forgot this time. Okay, guys, take care. Bye.